All right, welcome back. We got our weekly stock market update. This should be a quick one. There was really not a whole lot of movement in the overall markets this week, but you can see we've got a mixed stock heat map here. So some of the big movers this week: Google down 7%, Apple down 4%. You've got Berkshire Hathaway down 4.5% with the news that Warren Buffett will be stepping down, and some red here for healthcare technology and healthcare services. And you've got some pretty good green in the semiconductors down here. So a nice bounce this week for the semis. Nvidia also had a nice week this week. Now when we look at the ETF heat map, it's about as flat as you can get for the week. So S&P was down 0.07%. You've got the Nasdaq up 0.3%. Bond market pretty flat overall on the week. And commodities were green with gold and Bitcoin leading the charge there. When we look at the crypto heat map, a lot of green. You've got Bitcoin up 7%, Ethereum up 25%, Solana up almost 15%. So crypto market with a nice strong recovery here over the last few weeks. And when we look at the Nasdaq here, 5 days really not going anywhere, chopping sideways. We are still above the Liberation Day gap. And then when we look at the S&P 500, we are inside the Liberation Day gap still, with 5 days of just really chopping away sideways. So next week will be probably a bigger catalyst to either get a little pullback or finally get above, get out of this Liberation Day gap here for the S&P. When we look at oil had a nice recovery from its big drop on Monday. It was down to $55 a barrel. You've got gold making some big swings day to day. Big moves each day for gold. It's either up 1% or down 1%. So some nice volatility there. When we look at the volatility itself, man, what a collapse from the tariff spike that we had here. Just straight up, straight down. So we will see if we're due for another spike or if we really just keep collapsing here for volatility. And let's look at some interest rates. 10-year yield, last few days here making a move back to the upside, but back to where we were a week or so ago. So really not a whole lot of change there. We did rise after the Federal Reserve meeting, which we will talk about right now. So some key takeaways from the Fed meeting: they did not cut, they did not raise, they held steady for the third meeting in a row. Some of the big takeaways: the Fed acknowledged the ongoing inflationary pressures, mainly the uncertainty when it comes to inflation. Are tariffs going to be inflationary? Are they going to cause the economy to slow down? They don't know. Nobody knows. Are these tariffs going to go away? Are they going to be implemented? At what rate? So they're really having to wait to see what all of that resolves to, and then how the markets and the economy will respond to that. They did also say that no hurry to cut rates, and they also maintain their tightening of monetary policy, so reducing their securities and reducing their balance sheet. So pretty hawkish meeting from the Federal Reserve, and that's why yields were rising. And yields were rising, but surprisingly, Bitcoin ripping, markets holding up. So we'll see what next week brings with some more of the economic data we got coming up. The other big news here was the first trade deal was announced between the US and the UK. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. It's good that we got a deal, but the one that really matters is going to be China. So we'll have some news next week on that, as I believe US and China will be meeting over the weekend. So that'll probably be a big market mover if we get good news or bad news. Just get some clarity there so we can start pricing in what that may look like. All right, so let's take a quick look at a handful of names. Really not a whole lot to talk about. Nvidia with a nice move this week. Looking pretty constructive here for Nvidia. And let me... all right, so yeah, if we can get above 120 for Nvidia, it'd be very nice. But some chip export news this week. We got Amazon with a nice recovery here as well. Tesla looking very interesting this week. Surprising that it's up whatever 35% from the bad earnings that it announced, and that's why you can't make predictions. They announced terrible numbers and the stock goes up 35%. That's the epitome of Tesla and the stock market. Google. So Google down 9%, I believe, on some news that Safari search had its first deceleration. So people are using other ways to do their web searches other than Safari, and so that led to Google dropping. People are really fearful on Google Ads and Google Search losing market share to ChatGPT and other services. That's their most profitable piece of their business. Now, they did just announce earnings, and they did grow their search revenue by 10% last quarter. So we're not seeing it when it comes to Google's revenue and Google's earnings for search, but there's a lot of fear out there that that piece of their business is going to be open for disruption, and we will see. Google's pretty beaten down. It's not recovered like some of the other stocks that we just showed, Amazon, Nvidia, Tesla, and it's trading at a very, very good valuation, but maybe it's cheap for a reason. So we will have to wait and see here. I did buy some Google this week. I also bought some Apple this week, and I also bought some Berkshire Hathaway this week. So Apple and Berkshire are some newer additions to the portfolio, and we will have to wait and see. I'm not adding to Amazon here. I'm not adding to Nvidia here. I'm not adding to Tesla. I will wait for lower prices, as I already have a lot of those, large position in all those stocks. But Google and Apple and Berkshire, those were the big losers this week, and so that's what I bought this week. That was the red. That's what I bought. Let's see here. There was a handful of earnings this week. I'm probably due for another earnings update over the next week or so. So I'll save that for another video. But really not a whole lot else to talk about for this week. Let's take a quick sneak peek on what's coming next week. We've got CPI on Tuesday and some more inflation numbers on Thursday. We've got unemployment claims. So there's a lot of news coming up next week. Jerome Powell giving another speech Thursday morning. Consumer sentiment. So quite a bit of news next week, along with an update on the US-China tariff talks. So that'll be the big market movers for next week. So should be an exciting week, and we will probably make a much bigger move than we did this week. So that is all I got for you guys for this week. Happy Mother's Day, and enjoy the nice sunny weather here in California. All right, peace out.